Hi, fourth graders. So we are now going to be doing part 2 of the We Do for Unit 2, Day 6, and your I Do. First, for part 2 of the We Do, you're going to answer 2 multiple choice questions. The first is, what can the reader infer about Poseidon based on the passage? And the second is, which sentence from the passage best supports the inference in part A? So, on your last unit test, the whole class kind of struggled with picking the correct supports for the best evidence for your conclusions. So I really want you guys to focus on part B. And then once we're done, you're going to answer in race the following question. In the text, it said Poseidon's heart grew tender. What can the reader infer about Poseidon? So I will flag for you when that is said so that you can pay extra attention. All right, guys, we are going to get started. Atlantis, the legend of a lost city. First, there was chaos. From chaos sprang earth and heaven. From them came the race of Titans. 2 of them, Cronus and Rhea, seized power and ruled over all. Their son Zeus overthrew them. Then he and his brothers divided up the world. To Zeus went the heavens, to Hades the realms of the dead, while the seas and oceans went to the mighty Poseidon, who promised to guard the waters with care. Floating on one of Poseidon's emerald seas was a small rocky island. Few visited its shores, and no one bothered to give it a name. But the sun rose warmly over it each morning and set sleepily behind it every night. In the center of the island, there stood a mountain, and at the foot of the mountain lived a man called Evanor and his wife Leucippe. They lived happily together, working hard to tend the barren land, and brought up their daughter Cleito to honor all creatures. Poseidon grew curious. How could they be content with so little? He took on human form and crouched unseen behind a rock to find out. Each morning at daybreak, he watched Cleito walk over the pebbled ground barefoot and smiling to fill her water pot at the stream. Seeing Cleito in all her beauty, Poseidon's heart grew tender, and one day he stepped out from behind the rock to talk to her. Day after day, he came, and slowly she began to return his love. Finally, she agreed to become his bride. Her parents, unaware of Poseidon's divinity, blessed the union, and a simple wedding followed. But a god cannot stay hidden. After the wedding, all the spirits of the sea rose to the surface and sang, and Poseidon assumed his divine form once more. He vowed to rebuild the island and make it fit for a king and his queen. Poseidon used powers beyond human imagination to transform the isle into a paradise. First, he arranged alternate circles of land and sea, 3 of land and 3 of water, to enclose the mountain. Within each circle of land, a forest sprang up. Trees bloomed and grew heavy with fruits, and creatures multiplied. Next, he made a network of canals fed by waterfalls. Soon, the island was yielding 2 crops each year, one watered by winter rains, the other irrigated by Poseidon's canals. The rich earth was carpeted with herbs and vegetables, and thick with healing roots. From its depths, men dug out priceless yellow mountain copper. All things flourished on the sacred island. Then, under Poseidon's guidance, the inhabitants built a place fit for a god, with towers, gates, and parapets trimmed with gleaming brass and tin. In the center, they set up a holy temple dedicated to Poseidon and Cleito, with pinnacles of silver surrounded by a wall of gold. They built thermal baths and aqueducts, fountains and gardens, even a huge racecourse. It was a happy time for Poseidon and Cleito, and over the years, Cleito gave birth to 5 pairs of twin sons. Their firstborn son they named Atlas. In the summer of his 20th year, he was crowned High King, and they named the island Atlantis in his honor. Then, Poseidon divided the island into 10 parts and gave his sons 1/10 each. To ensure peace in his new island city, Poseidon set down laws in stone on a pillar of the temple. Chief among them was the commandment that no person take up arms against another, with a terrible curse on anyone who disobeyed. Every 5 years, Atlas and the 9 princes gathered by night beside the pillar to judge their people according to Poseidon's laws. The people of Atlantis became wise, gentle, and great-spirited. They were sober and kind, as the Creator had always wanted them to be. Above all, they lived in peace. So Atlantis prospered. Its splendid docks were thronged with ships and merchandise, and behind them, a towering lighthouse lit the way for incoming boats bringing cargoes from other lands. The harbors hummed with trade. Bridges and an underground canal were built to connect the 3 circles of land around the mountain, as the people grew even richer. Poseidon, watching from the waves, was content and went away to his home at the bottom of the sea. Many years passed. Poseidon lay sleeping at the bottom of the ocean. The people of Atlantis began to change. Slowly, very slowly, the godlike part of their souls faded, and their mortal, human natures took over. They started to argue. Gradually, they lost the gift of goodness and became infected with ambition and power. Greed filled the citizens' hearts. The streets of Atlantis, once safe, became dangerous as people began to steal, cheat, and lie. One day, Zeus, god of gods, who ruled according to the law of the Creator, looked down from the heavens above. He saw the city walls crumbling with neglect, the empty temple, and worst of all, people fighting one another. He roared out his anger. The sound of his fury woke Poseidon. Rising to the surface of the waves, the sea god looked out over his once perfect kingdom and wept. Now he had no choice. He must carry out his terrible curse. Raising his trident, he stirred the seas into a wave that rose so high it lashed the heavens. The wave vibrated with a roar that could be heard 2,000 miles away, and the earth trembled in terror. Gathering its full force, the wave crashed upon the land, while burning rain and ashes blistered down from above. In a single day and night, Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea. Then there was silence. The city sank slowly to its new resting place on the ocean floor. The people of Atlantis did not die. They continued to exist beneath the waves, but they never spoke or quarreled or fought again. As year followed year, they paid a terrible penance, learning to live without gold or possessions in the cold depths. In time, they became little more than creatures of the water. To this day, Atlantis has never been found. Some people believe it's still there, under the sea, waiting to be discovered. And there's a little part in the back that says, "Where was Atlantis?" People have suggested many different places where Atlantis might once have been. The oldest Greek legends describe Atlantis being out to the west in the middle of the ocean. The ocean is still named the Atlantic, after Cleto's son. The people of Atlantis are said to have spread out to other countries, founding settlements in Europe and Africa, and even the land we now call America. Some think Atlantis existed more or less as Plato described it, and that its people left traces behind them. Egypt has pyramids, Mexico has pyramids, so perhaps the Atlantean settlers built them in both places, and their submerged homeland was midway between the two countries. Others suggest that Atlantis was closer to America. The native inhabitants of the West Indies told early explorers that their islands were once part of a single landmass, but that a disaster long ago shattered it. The 5th century Greek philosopher Proclus, who wanted to convince his readers that Atlantis was real, writes very mysteriously, as if he knew the West Indies and their story. Some people suggest that Atlantis was a part of Britain. Legend tells of a sunken land between Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. The theory taken most seriously is that the story is actually about the island of Crete, which was highly civilized and ruled over several smaller islands. One of them, Thera, was partially destroyed in about 1450 BCE by a tremendous eruption, which also destroyed part of Crete, and its civilization never recovered. With so much uncertainty, some argue that the story of Atlantis is not history at all, but a myth warning us against conflict and power-seeking. Yet the legend is so vivid that many will always believe Atlantis existed somewhere. Okay, guys, so that concludes the story, and now you should be ready to do the We Do Part 2 and the You Do. All right, go get it done.